intervene on behalf of Naboth. God is not silent when his people are mistreated. Justice is topmost on his list. It may take a bit of time. The devil will seem as if he's winning, but we know the Lord is still in control. One day, Ahab decided he is going to go and fight in a battle. But before he went, he said to the king of Judah, they were still worshiping the true God in Judah. In Israel, everything was going south. So he went to say, your men are like my men. We are family, basically. We all come from the same heritage. Let us go and fight against this army that is very strong. And then they said, look, the practice is we have prophets that we consult. They will predict what would happen before we go in this battle. And Ahab had 400 of them. And they all said, yes, go, you are going to win. One after another, they told him, God will give you victory. Victory is certain. But the king of Judah was not buying that. He said, where I come from, the prophets would prophesy in the name of the Lord. Is there not even one who prophesies in the name of the Lord? And then the king said, yes, there is one called Micaiah, but I don't like him. Why? Because he does not prophesy anything good about me. And then the king of Judah said, yes, bring that one. And let's hear what he's got to say. And they sent a messenger to get Micaiah. And then when the messenger found him, he said, look, 400 of the prophets have told the king what he wants to hear. You have to say the things that the king wants to hear. And then they brought Micaiah, and then the king of Israel asked him, tell us, are we going to win or are we going to lose? And Micaiah said, go, the Lord is with you, you shall win. And he knew that the prophets of God do not prophesy like that. He said, how many times do I tell you to tell? How many times have I told you that you should tell me the truth all the time? Say it in the name of the Lord. He was put in a corner. He could not lie this time. That's what they did to Christ. He says, are you the Son of God? Tell me in the name of God. Then he said, yes, I am. You said it. So Micaiah said, because you put me in a corner, I cannot lie in the name of the Lord. I saw Israel were like sheep without a shepherd. So he was basically telling him, if you go, you will die. And then Zedekiah, one of the false prophets, came and slapped him and said, since when has the Spirit of God come out of me and gone to you? And the king said, put him in prison. I told you he doesn't like me. Put him in prison and make his stay as bitter as possible. He tried to convince the king of Israel not to do anything against the Lord. But he was stubborn. And he decided to beat the system by pretending to be a general soldier. So he removed his clothes and put on a soldier's attire. And he went to battle, thinking he's going to outwit God. Even though the prophet said he's going to die, he's going to beat the system. So he went to battle. When they were fighting, it came to a point where they looked for the king, but they couldn't find him because Israel was being defeated. Probably they're about to give up. Then one of the soldiers just took an arrow and he shot without aim And that arrow had the name of Ahab on it. It went straight for him, and he was wounded. Then he said, "Take me back to my chariot." He was bleeding profusely. When he was there, they tried to resuscitate him, but he died. And as the Lord had predicted, they went to wash the chariot, and the dogs licked the blood of Ahab. But the reason I'm bringing this story up is because of Naaman. Naaman was a commander of the army that was responsible for the end of this man's life. God had used him to perform this task. But I don't think Naaman knew that God was using him. This is the description of Naaman. He was a great man. And the king liked him so much. He was respected in the community. And the most important thing is the Lord gave him victory. Why would God give a pagan army commander victory? He doesn't call upon the name of God. But angels would fight alongside him and win battles. And the one thing that probably was negative about his life is that he had leprosy. So he was dying slowly. There was a problem that he had, which he could not solve himself. With all the money that he had, the position that he had, the victories in the past that he had achieved, all the medals that he had could not fix this medical issue. But there was a maid that they had taken captive from Israel. She was a little girl, but she had compassion on her master. Now, this is a bit of a challenge for me because I would not be happy to see my enemies prosper, especially when they take me from my parents, my land, and probably kill my family. How does this little girl come to a point that she wishes this man well? Where is that coming from? We know that it is the Spirit of God. If somebody speaks bad about me, I don't even want to talk to them, let alone somebody who makes me their slave. But this is the great plan of God that He has for Naaman. He puts people in places, and then there's this disease. Everything is just making him come to God so that they have a relationship with Him. So there are people planted around Naaman with a specific job. But as you're going to see in the whole story, some of them didn't do a good job, like Gehazi. So there are people that God allows in our lives, that He allows to come in our lives to encourage us to go to God. And there are some people who are there specifically to discourage us on this journey. So the lady said, this young girl said, if only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria. So she knew that there is a man of God. And this man of God does God's will. With faith, there is nothing impossible. Now remember, Elisha was not only a man of God, but he had this ability to see what's happening in people's lives. He was a prophet. He could understand, I don't know how to explain it. He was not just a mere human being, if you get what I mean. He was gifted in that respect. And this young girl knew about it. And surprisingly, Naaman listened to this girl. Why would he do that? Is it that desperate to listen to a slave? One writer said maybe this young girl's life was such that she had integrity, that whatever she said, they knew that it's not only true, but it's valuable. So this Israelite girl has got respect in this house. She was a light to the heathen. This was the whole idea that God had for Israel, to be the light to a dying people of the world, that they may come to God. And she is doing exactly that. If only my Lord could go in Samaria, there is a man there who would heal him of his leprosy. She preached with her words and with her life. That's how powerful she was. This is a challenge to all the young people in this church. The same spirit that was in Joseph was in this young lady. They did not harbor feelings of hatred. There was no room for that in this young girl's heart. She believed her body was the temple of God. Love, joy, peace, humility were the things that were shelved in there. There was no room for jealousy. There was no room for pride. And God found it easy to work with her. Then the king gave him a letter to go to the king of Israel. And the letter was written simply saying, I've sent my servant Naaman that you may heal him of his leprosy. When the king read that letter, he was angry. And the reason why he was angry is because he thought that this man was only trying to find fault with him, a quarrel, so that he can have a reason to invade Israel again. And he tore his clothes, and Elisha heard about it. And Elisha sent a message saying, why have you torn your clothes? Send that man to me. It's not about you. It's not political. This is a process of salvation that God has started through this young girl. Don't come and mess things up. The speed with which this process is going, don't slow it down. Put your emotions aside. Let that person come to me, that they may know there is a prophet of God in Israel. So, Naaman went with so many goods. You know, the writers say he almost had between 2 and 3 million worth of goods that he wanted to give as presents if he was going to be healed in Israel. So this glamorous and, wealthy man is coming to the man of God. But the man of God does not respond the way that he thought he would respond. He just sent a servant and said to him, go and wash in the river Jordan 7 times and then you'll be clean. Now, Naaman wasn't very happy with that because he was a man of position. At least if the man of God would come out and meet him, and then he'll be impressed by these worldly possessions that he had. 3 million is not something you can just look and say, okay, I don't want it. The man of God will probably be impressed and then regard him highly. But I'm sure God had instructed him, don't go out, don't talk to him, send a Gehazi and tell him this is what you have to do. He was very angry. Now, at this stage, the whole plan of salvation was working, but the devil knew that if this man continues on this path, he will be saved, not only from his leprosy, but also he would have a connection with God. So he decides to bring up pride to stop this whole thing. Why would he use pride? Because pride is the worst of all the sins. Now, C.S. Lewis says, lust, immorality, greed, and all these are like flea bites compared to pride. It is the biggest sin that even God would put in place systems to protect his servants from going that road. Paul said, God did that to me. A servant of sin, a servant of Satan, to stop me from getting puffed up. Why? Because this sin is the complete anti-God state of mind. There is no greater sin than this one. And the devil knew that for him to become the devil, it was that sin. So this is the number one weapon of choice. Because it transformed angels into demons. And the devil into a devil. And the complete opposite is humility. It transforms humans into angels. And the champion of humility was our Lord Jesus Christ. Now, I don't understand the extent of his humility, but when you really look at it, he was the creator of heaven and earth who comes down to become a servant. Let's look at it the other way. When we think about how great God is, if you take an individual and compare him to the whole earth, he's very small. If you go to all the stars and the galaxies, he becomes even smaller. When you look at the whole universe that God created, he's so tiny, he's insignificant. This is why David says, when I look at what you've made, Lord, who am I? What is man? So this writer, C.S. Lewis, says, unless you see God that way, that in all aspects of your life, he is that much superior to you, you are worshiping an imaginary God. God is so great that there is no room for human exaltation of any form, sort, or shape. All our works are like filthy rags. So this writer by name C.S. Lewis says, it's either you consider yourself a filthy rag that's good for nothing, or you just say you're nothing. You have those two choices when you come and compare yourself with God. That's why God hates pride, because pride does not give us the true picture of who God is. There is nothing in us. Without God, we are nothing. So as he tries to go back in his rage, his servants come to him and say to him, if he had asked you to do something more difficult than this, would you not have done it? He's only asked you to go and wash. His reasoning is, I've got my own idea of how this process should have gone. I thought he was going to come out, call upon his God, and then the leprosy will go, and then I'll give him all this money. That was what he was thinking. And he was saying, even the water, are there no better rivers in Damascus? He wanted to change this. Let's change it. I want to go to a different river, not this one. Why is he telling me to do this? But these servants were so used to taking orders from their master. But Naaman was not used to taking orders. And the devil knew that. So he put up the last fight, hoping that Naaman would just tell the man of God to go to hell and he would go back to Syria. But thank God, the servants of Naaman would not let that happen. Thank God for the people that God has put in our lives, who, when we are going the opposite, the wrong way, will come and say, look, go back and do what God tells you to do. There is no point in fighting. God only will revenge. Revenge is mine. These are the type of people we should surround ourselves with, not the people who tell us to go and fight. Turn the other cheek. The principles of God. People who come and tell you to do what is right with God. What do you gain by fighting? You can't even win somebody else's love by forcing them to love you. Love, there is no fear in love. There is no fear in love. God has not given us the principle. God has got a plan for our lives, and he places people in that path. Before we conclude, there is only one way where we are going to be saved. Despite all that we think, there is only one way. I know it's a challenge for most of us because we really need to work our own salvation. There is no other name given under heaven where we are going to be saved. I'm sure other religions don't like us for this, but this is what the Bible says. There is only one name given. That is the name of Christ. We can formulate our own ways of salvation. But Jesus paid it all. He paid it all. If we imagine that we can work our way to heaven, like Naaman, if we want to find a better God than Jesus, we are wasting our time. The River Jordan is the river that God said we should wash in and be clean. We can go to Damascus and look for better rivers there, but they won't do the job. Christ is not as glamorous as the wealth that Naaman brought. But the man of God, Elisha, said, all this wealth, all this money is nothing compared to the relationship that I have with my God. I will not take even a cent from you. Imagine how wealthy Elisha would have been. He would not even have to work for the rest of his life. But he was under instruction that the world is just the world, and period. Relationship with God is far worth more than millions of dollars. Far worth more than that. But how long did Christ take to explain this to the disciples? They wouldn't understand. I don't understand either. Why? Because the word gets thrown into my eyes, into my face every day. The rich and the famous are always in my eyes. I want to be like them. But what I have is far worth more than silver and gold. May the Lord bless the reading of His word.